Hi, I'm Ryan. I just made 27 batches of cookies to try to answer the question, what makes the best chocolate chip cookie? Let's go.
Have you ever noticed that all baked goods have essentially the same three or four main ingredients? How is it that when you mix flour, sugar, eggs, and butter, sometimes you get a cookie, sometimes you get a cake, sometimes you get a muffin, a pancake, sometimes you get brownies, a scone, shortbread, sometimes you get bread? A quick internet search determines that it's the ratios that matter. For example, a cookie has a 3 to 2 to 1 flour, butter, sugar ratio. A cake usually has a 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 flour, butter, sugar, egg ratio. There's a bit more to it, like how much leavening, that's the baking soda and baking powder, is used, but mostly it's just playing around with these ratios that make baked goods different from each other. When I think about ratios, right away I start to think about vectors with different components on a Cartesian plane. Further research revealed that the component that is butter or fat varies the least, so I decided to plot a three-dimensional graph with one axis each for flour, sugar, and egg. I'm a novice when it comes to coding, but ChatGPT gave me a great code script to put into Colab that would make a 3D rotatable graph for me. Since it's all about ratios, each baked good is like a line that extends out from the origin. Doubling a recipe will keep all ratios constant, so baked goods has the same physical properties and flavor at every point on the line. Here you can see how different baked goods differ. Look at brownie, way out there towards the sugar axis. Then look at bread, way over by the flour axis. Then I had an idea. Could I make a 3D display of baked goods to test or, share with my coworkers? I could make a low, medium, and high proportion of each variable, flour, sugar, and egg. I researched what the normal range of these ingredients in different recipes was, then set low, medium, and high to equally spaced variables within that range. At first, I was just going to scoop 1 scoop, 2 scoop, 3 scoop of whatever ingredient, but then I realized this would make way too little cookie near the origin and way too much farther out. I wanted to make the same amount of each. Also, I thought it was important to hold the other ingredients constant, like butter, vanilla, baking soda, salt, and chocolate chips. After a bunch of drop calculations in Excel, I figured out the exact amounts needed for each. Initially, I was going to batch them into groups of 9, then modify a third of a third accordingly, but this was difficult if I were to keep butter and the other ingredients constant. So ultimately, I decided just to bite the bullet and make 27, that's 3 by 3 by 3 batches. It's just 27 batches of cookies, I thought. How hard could it be? Apparently, an Oreo cookie is like 15 grams. I figured I'd make 4 little cookies in each batch, about the size of an Oreo each, because I wanted everyone to try a few kinds to compare, and I wanted more than one person to try each batch. 4 cookies at 15 grams is 60 grams a batch. More spreadsheet math helped me determine the total amounts of each ingredient that would be needed. Next, I figured out how much of each constant ingredient was needed per batch. I used a syringe to put 5 drops of vanilla, that's 0.3 milliliters, and a knife's edge to get 0.24 grams of salt and baking soda in every cup. I did the best I could. Butter was easy to divide into 27 little blocks of equal size. Then I added the sugar. The sugar was different for every cup. Again, this is because I wanted to keep the total cookie size the same, even as other variables were increasing. I used a food scale to carefully measure the sugar. Egg was the next variable to be added. I calculated the total volume of egg needed for all 27 batches, thank you Excel, and syringed it out carefully, again, a different volume in every batch. Finally, it was time to add the flour. After adding it, I realized a flaw in my plan. A lot of these ratios, especially the batches with little egg and lots of flour, were going to be really powdery. I made the decision to add enough water to at least hold the flour together. And last but not least, I added a heaping tablespoon of chocolate chips to every batch. By now I realized that some of these cookies were going to be kind of hard to eat, so worst case scenario, they'd get a mouthful of chocolate. I tried to cook each batch for 8 minutes at 375 degrees Fahrenheit, but I learned a lesson when the very first baking sheet was in the oven. A lot of the high egg ratio batches were practically liquid, like an uncooked cake, and they spilled off the baking sheet. Smoke filled the oven and almost set the fire alarm off. After I aired out the place, I switched to little muffin trays, which I should have done in the first place. Here's how they turned out. These are ordered 1 to 27, left to right, top to bottom, just like reading.
Yeah, I'm so fresh like the morning. shining so bright, don't come and try to.
There you have it, 27 unique batches. I had a funny idea of how to present this for people to eat. Presenting the cookie matrix. It's a graph with 3 axes, flour, sugar, and egg. I wanted people to reach into the graph to pick out a cookie to eat. Then I put a tier list and a pen next to the cookie matrix so that folks could give their feedback. Later, I would give 1 point for F tier, 2 points for E tier, and so on, with S tier earning 7 points so that we could determine subjectively what was the best cookie. Overall, my cookie matrix created a lot of excitement. My colleagues loved reaching into the matrix to try a bite and sharing what they liked best in a cookie. It was just as much fun to watch the enjoyment they got from an amazing cookie as it was to see them awkwardly laugh in disgust when someone got one that was way doughier than expected. I collected their feedback, and here are the results. Number 17 was their favorite. I was a little surprised there weren't a few different champions, maybe one for the cookiest and one for the cakiest. But the people spoke, and 17 was the standard to which no other could compare. 17 was the one that was medium flour, high sugar, medium egg. But get this, the mass ratio of flour to sugar to butter to egg was exactly 4 to 3 to 2 to 1. Of all the combinations, this simple ratio was the best. Notice the slight distinction from the standard cookie recipe of 3 flour to 1 sugar to 2 butter. In a blind test, it turns out folks like more sugar than they let on.
Keep coming with it, place your bets on us, get your money and flip it.
There you have it, the best cookies ever. What do you think? Enjoy.